Oh hey, I'm Joe the Blue Wizard and welcome back to my channel. So today I wanted to do something a little bit different, something a little bit extra special in order to say bye to 2020 and hello there to 2021. So today, as promised, I will be conducting my very first food Q&A. So on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram, I asked you guys to submit your food-related questions to me, and I'm going to answer them right here, right now. I told you guys that you could ask me any food-related question, anything from how to boil an egg to what is my favorite of any kind of food. All right, and you guys certainly delivered. So I have a bunch of questions here to answer for you guys today. But before we get into that, I just want to make sure to remind you guys to hit that like button down below, as well as to hit the subscribe button and the little bell for notifications. So this way you're notified every time that I post a new video. Doing all these things really helps me out, guys. It helps my channels to grow. So if you could do that for me, that would be awesome. But without further ado, let's get to it and answer some questions. First question comes from the official yearbook. Who are your favorite famous cooks/chefs? Well, if I wanted to pick my top favorites, I would have to say, of course, first, the queen, Nigella Lawson. She is an absolute favorite of mine, not only because she is, well, let's face it, the ideal woman for me. She's gorgeous, she loves to eat, she has a British accent. What's not to love? But it's not just because of those things. She is also a fantastic cook. She's a home cook, just like me. Her recipes are great. On top of that, I am so inspired by the way that she describes food, both when she talks about it as well as when she writes about it. Her food descriptions are on point, and I aspire to be as good as her when it comes to describing my food. The other two chefs who are a super huge inspiration to me and are my two favorite are Ina Garten and Julia Child. Now, the reason why they are my favorites is because they have a very similar approach to cooking that I do. They take more of a scientific approach. They want to make sure that their recipes turn out the exact same way every single time. So they give exact measurements for things like salt and all their seasonings and things like that. There's a lot of cooks out there who are really, really great, who are, you know, pinch and dash cooks out there who just add like a pinch of this, a dash of this, you know, and their recipes turn out great as long as you are really sort of like, you know, more artistic and go with the flow. But like I said, I like more of a scientific approach, and both Ina and Julia both have that sort of method to their cooking. And so I really find them to be inspirational, and I love cooking their recipes. Even though those three fantastic ladies are my top three favorite celebrity chefs or cooks, I do have a bunch of others as well. I really enjoy recipes from Yotam Ottolenghi, Graham Elliott. Sherry Yard is a fantastic baker, and I'm so inspired by her. I just got her cookbook for Christmas this year. And also Carla Hall is also a really, really great chef, and I'm really inspired by her recipes as well. So there's a lot of people out there who I really, really enjoy, but those are my top favorites. Deb asks, did you get permission from Daisy Sour Cream to use the word dollop? LOL. Deb is talking about my last video in which I used the word dollop a lot. When I was watching the video back the other day, I realized, man, you really say that word a lot. Dollop, 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 dollop. Okay, dollop, first of all, is not owned by Daisy Sour Cream, and so anyone can use the word, but I did use it quite a bit in that video. So I apologize for my repetitiveness. Moving on. Stephanie asks a really good question. She says, recipes are always calling for unsalted butter. Why? I always use salted. What difference is it making? Well, Stephanie, the answer to why all the recipes ask for unsalted butter is really all about control. Salted butter is not really regulated by anybody, and so all the companies that make salted butter can add however much salt or however little salt they want and still call it salted butter. Plus, every batch that they make may not be consistent from one batch that they make to the next. The reason why we use unsalted butter is because you can control the amount of salt that you are adding to your recipe. Now, am I going to tell anybody that they're a bad cook for using salted butter? No. Is salted butter going to ruin your recipes? No. But if you want to make sure that your recipes are coming out consistently every single time, the exact same way that you make them, then you definitely want to go with unsalted butter and add the right amount of salt yourself, instead of just guessing as to how much salt is in the butter that you're using. Eric asks, when did you start to bake or cook? And who helped you to learn to bake or cook? Kill asks the same question. Who taught you how to cook? Well, I better answer that question or he might kill me. So, who taught me how to bake or cook, and when did I start? I started baking, according to legend, according to my mother, at the age of 2 is when I started helping her make Christmas cookies every year. I started getting more serious about cooking as a whole probably when I turned about the age of 12 is when I started helping to cook for my family. So that's really when I got started. In terms of who I learned from, that was actually a decent number of sources. The vast majority of my cooking skills and my cooking learning comes from TV. And from cookbooks and cook magazines and things like that. I am mostly self-taught. So I learned a lot from watching people like Julia Child on TV and watching people like Ina Garten and Rachel Ray and all of those people on TV. Not to mention America's Test Kitchen, and then of course reading all of the huge amounts of recipe books that I have. I have a lot of recipe books. So I am mostly self-taught. But I did learn some of the basics from a few very important people. One of which, of course, is my mother, who got me started on the baking train, starting baking cookies with her when I was very, very small. And so she sort of got me started into the baking world. And so I learned a lot from watching her and baking with her. And I still bake Christmas cookies with her every year. And of course, the other person that I learned a lot from was my grandmother on my father's side, Zofia, who is a fantastic cook. She has been cooking forever. The woman is amazing. Her food always turns out great. And even though she's a tiny little Polish woman and she makes fantastic Polish food, she didn't just limit herself there. She cooked all different kinds of things. I remember her making pizza and teriyaki chicken and all kinds of things in her kitchen. So she was fearless. She was never afraid to try something new. I went over and learned a lot of cooking basics from my grandmother when I want to say I was in high school at some point. I learned a lot of stuff from her. In fact, I shared a recipe with you guys, my grandmother's potato dumplings, and I learned that recipe by going over to her house and learning how to cook. And I learned a bunch of other recipes from her that way as well. So my grandmother is a huge inspiration to me, and I learned a lot from her. Josh asks, have you made beef Wellington? No, Josh, I have not made beef Wellington, but it has always been on my list of things to try. The reason why I haven't tried it yet is that, first off, it's expensive because you use beef loin, which can be pretty pricey. And second of all, it's something that was really best eaten the day of. And because I live alone, it's not really something that I want to sort of like, you know, take and reheat over and over. Though you probably could, it's just not going to be as good. And if I'm going to spend that much money for a beef loin, I'm going to want to make sure that it's eaten pretty quickly. So it's going to be something I'm going to save for a party one of these days. I'll get to it eventually. Kevin asks, what dish made the biggest mess in your kitchen? Well, Kevin, I tend to be a pretty clean cook when I cook in the kitchen, and so there's not really much that has made a huge disaster out of my kitchen. However, I did make a mess once that sort of scarred me against one food stuff in particular, so I'll tell you that story. When I was probably 12 or 13, I know I was old enough to be left home alone because my mother was not at home at the time. So probably around 12 or 13, we had some Velveeta in the fridge, the Velveeta cheese, and I had seen on a commercial that someone had like cubed up Velveeta with salsa and made like a dip. And I was like, oh, that's a good idea. So I'm gonna take and cube up some Velveeta, but I didn't wanna put the salsa in it, so I just did the Velveeta alone, threw it in the microwave and started trying to heat it up. But I set the microwave for way too long a period of time, and the Velveeta exploded and burned in the microwave. Now, this was one of the first times that I was left home alone, and so I did not want my parents to find out that I had made this huge disaster. So I decided I'm gonna clean up the microwave. The smart thing to do, right? Until I realized that I, for whatever reason, couldn't find the appropriate cleaning product in order to clean the microwave for whatever reason. I don't know, I was a dumb kid. And so the only thing that I could find was Febreze. So I decided to clean my microwave with Febreze. Let me tell you, children, do not do this. The mixture of the smells of burnt Velveeta cheese and Febreze, which is, by the way, just like a scented thing. It's not actually cleaning anything. Let's just put it this way. I've been scarred against Velveeta probably for life. Anytime that I smell or catch a whiff of Velveeta cheese, it just throws me back to that moment and I am just scarred. I cannot deal with it anymore. So that's my one kitchen mess story. Elizabeth asks, what do you like doing more, cooking meals or baking sweets? And lastly, have you ever taken any formal cooking lessons, or are you completely self-taught? Well, Elizabeth, I actually prefer baking to cooking. The reason is because baking takes more of a scientific approach than cooking does. Cooking there's science involved with it, but it's more of an art form. And not to say that baking is not art, because it also is, but it's more of a scientific process. It's more chemistry. There are more rules to follow, and I really enjoy that structure. I am a scientist by nature. I have a degree in biology, and so the process of baking really speaks to me because it's very consistent and the product should turn out the same way every single time. Whereas cooking, there's a lot more variety, there's a lot more play with it, and there's a lot more artistic, which are not my strengths. And so I really do prefer the baking process over cooking, but I still, of course, enjoy cooking as well. And I am completely self-taught in terms of formal cooking lessons. I have never had a formal cooking class or taken any formal cooking classes. I have really kind of wanted to at some point, maybe go take a few cooking classes to sort of brush up on some of the things that I don't know or I'm not familiar with. But I really like the idea of being a home cook. So it'd probably be a long time before I do anything like that. So I am pretty much self-taught, except for the few other people who have kind of helped me along the way. Carrie asks, if you had your own wizard, what would you rather have it do for you? Clean up dishes after cooking or grocery shop for ingredients for you? Carrie, are you trying to say that I am not a real wizard? The shade. Well, in answer to your question, Carrie, I would rather have it do the cleanup. I really enjoy the shopping process and going to buy groceries and things like that and finding the fresh ingredients and things like that and making sure that I'm picking the best things that I can find. So I really enjoy the shopping process. The cleanup, not so much. If I could have somebody to clean up after me every time that I bake or cook, that would be fantastic. Corey asks, can you explain the art of flambe? Well, Corey, flambe is when you add alcohol to something that's in a saute pan and then you light it on fire to make a big whoosh of fire. It's really mostly done for show. But your question did get me a little bit curious about where flambe came from, so I did a little research. And I found that flambe originated sometime in the 14th century. There was a waiter named Henry Carpenter who accidentally set some fire to crepes that he was preparing for King Edward VII. And so that's where they think it came from. So it must have made such an impression upon the king and made such a big show that he decided to make it like a thing. And so thus flambe was born. At least that's the legend around it, okay? But again, guys, flambe is really mostly for show. You don't really need to set fire to anything in your kitchen. You could really just sort of cook off the alcohol. But some people do say it gives a nice little extra, smoky flavor to some things that you're making. And maybe one day I'll make a video showing you guys how to flambe things. That might be a fun thing to do. So thank you, Corey, for your question. John asks, what is your all-time favorite dessert? Well, John, my all-time favorite dessert is also the one that I am most nervous to do in the kitchen, and that is cheesecake. One of my favorite foods on the planet is cheese. And then you combine it with one of my favorite things to do, baking and sweets. I love cheesecake. It is my absolute favorite dessert. And it is also the one that I'm most scared to make, mostly because I'm afraid that one day I'm going to make a cheesecake that's going to turn out bad. And then I'm going to be very disappointed and scarred for life because it is my favorite. So cheesecake is my all-time favorite dessert. And I do make it on occasion, but not really a lot, mostly because, again, I don't want to mess it up. I'm so nervous about messing it up because it's my favorite. So there you go. That's my favorite dessert. Mr. O'Connell asks, does the existence of dumplings imply the uncut dough would be a dumple? Well, Mr. O'Connell, no. However, you did also inspire me to do a little bit of research. So once again, I did a little research into where dumplings originated from. Not the dish dumplings, but where the word came from, since you asked about the word itself. The word dumpling is derived from the 17th century Norfolk word that is called dump, which also means lump, or of the consistency of dough. So a dumpling would just be the smaller form of dump or lump. So it's a small lump, small lumps. That's where it comes from. So there you go. Fun fact. Now, there were a lot of you guys who asked me how to make certain dishes or certain foods or give you certain recipes of mine. And I decided so many of them were such great ideas that I decided that instead of showing you guys how to do those things in this video, I was actually going to make other videos about doing just those things by themselves because they were such great ideas. Stephanie, for instance, asked how to decorate cookies and to do a tutorial on how to decorate cookies. Stephanie, you got it. Morgan asked for my recipe for chocolate cakey crackle cookies, which I made for her anatomy class years ago. Girl, I got you. We'll show that recipe in a future video. Monique asked about making pancakes from a box because she's never done it before. Well, that inspired me, Monique. We're gonna do a video in the future all about pancakes. We're gonna talk about the difference between boxed pancakes and scratch pancakes. Are scratch pancakes really better than boxed? And are boxed pancakes really more convenient than scratch pancakes? We'll find out in a video this year. Tony asked me for a recipe for macaroni and cheese. I got you, Tony. Becky asked me how to make gravy from turkey drippings, and Caleb has been asking me for a long time to make a turkey video. Guys, I promise you will get a turkey video out of me for 2021. It was going to happen in 2020, and then 2020. It just didn't happen. But I promise you guys it's gonna happen in 2021. And then lastly, Elizabeth asked me for my recipe for pulled pork. Well, girl, I got you. I'm gonna do a pulled pork video this year in 2021. Now, this is not to say that you are not going to get any cooking out of me from this video, because I do have one thing to show you. Deb says, okay, Einstein, tell me how to make the perfect reverse sear steak indoors. Well, kids, Deb is actually a very good friend of mine, and we have discussed reverse searing in the past. Deb knows full well that I do not reverse sear my steaks. Why? Because it just takes longer than the regular method of making a steak. And as we all know, I am impatient. And so I don't use the reverse sear method. But Deb thinks that the mark of a good chef is knowing how to reverse sear a steak. So, fine. We'll do it your way today. To the kitchen. I'm going to start by preheating my oven to 275 degrees. Now here I have a 1 to 1.5 inch steak that I am salting and peppering on both sides. I then place the steak onto a sheet pan that has a wire rack on it and place it into the oven. I will bake it until it reaches 120 degrees Fahrenheit. That is for a medium steak, and that'll take about 30 to 40 minutes. 5 minutes before my steak is about to reach temperature, I place a very heavy pan, this is a cast iron skillet, on to the very highest heat on my stovetop. I add a little oil to the pan, and as soon as my steak comes out of the oven, I sear both sides for 2 to 3 minutes per side. You want a nice, crispy crust. After the steak comes out of the pan, I salt it lightly and let it rest for about 5 minutes. And there you have it, a perfectly cooked medium steak, the reverse sear method way. Now guys, the reverse sear method for cooking a steak probably is the best method for cooking a steak for most consistent results. But as you guys saw, it took me about an hour to do. Whereas making a steak the regular way, where you're placing on a pan and cooking it until it has the appropriate temperature, that can take anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes depending on how you like your steak cooked. So again, impatient. 5 to 10 minutes, an hour. 5 to 10 minutes, an hour. I'm gonna go with the 5 to 10 minute method. But if you want perfectly cooked steak every single time, definitely use the reverse searing method. Are you happy, Deb? Well guys, that's all the questions that I'm going to be answering in this video. If there are other questions that you'd like to see me answer, leave me a comment down below and maybe I'll make another one of these videos. Now, even though you didn't get a recipe out of this video, don't worry, I still got you covered. BlueWizardFood.com today has my recipe for crispy coconut cookies posted. So make sure to check the link in the description below or just head straight to BlueWizardFood.com for that recipe. And of course, you can follow me on all of my social medias. I can be found at JoeTheBlueWiz on both Facebook and Instagram. And last but not least, guys, don't forget that you don't have to be a professional chef or even a wizard in order to make magic in your kitchen. Happy New Year, guys. Bye now.